The champagne flute felt cold in my hand. My mother, Catherine, tapped her own glass for a toast. She smiled that bright, sharp smile she reserved for investors and magazine covers. She announced that my sister, Amelia, was being promoted to full senior partner. I waited. The partners at the table clapped. Amelia beamed, raising her glass to my mother. Catherine then turned to me. Her smile softened, becoming the kind of smile you give to a valued employee, not a daughter. She said that given my incredible work on the Kestrel deal, I was being moved to a new strategic role. A role to leverage my talents away from the front lines. I knew what strategic meant. It meant a smaller office in a different wing. It meant no clients. It meant no equity. It was a golden coffin. This was my reward for landing the biggest client in our firm's 10-year history. But I just smiled. I nodded. I raised my glass with everyone else. I toasted my sister's success. They didn't know. They had no idea that I had been in the main conference room an hour earlier, looking for my notes. They didn't know I had heard them. I heard my mother and Amelia practicing this exact speech. I heard them laughing. I heard Amelia say she couldn't wait to get the workhorse out of the way so the show pony could finally run the stable. I heard my mother agree. I heard them finalize the plan to dissolve my partnership shares the moment the Kestrel deal was signed. They thought they were planning my exit. They had no idea I was about to orchestrate theirs. My life up to that point had been defined by a simple, unspoken rule. Amelia was the one to be seen, and I was the one to do the work. My mother, Catherine, built Archer Consulting from nothing. She was a legend. A shark in a Chanel suit. She demanded perfection, but she only rewarded performance. Or so, I thought. My father was not in the picture. It was just the three of us. Catherine, the queen. Amelia, the princess. And me, Alex. I was the one who fixed the printers. Amelia got the MBA from the right school. I got the statistics degree from a state university. Amelia knew how to charm a dinner party. I knew how to build a financial model from raw, chaotic data. When we both started at the firm, our paths were set. Amelia was put in business development, which meant long lunches and industry galas. Her photo was everywhere. She was the bright, charming face of Archer Consulting. I was put in analytics and strategy. The engine room. For 7 years, I lived in the data. I was the first one in and the last one out. When Amelia brought in a potential lead from a cocktail party, I was the one who stayed up for 48 hours building the pitch deck that actually won the contract. When a client had an impossible problem, I was the one who found the solution. My mother called it good synergy. Amelia got the credit. I got the next assignment. It was a quiet, grinding erasure. Every success was absorbed by the brand. Every failure was mine alone. I would see Amelia quoted in business journals, reciting phrases and strategies that I had written for her, verbatim. My mother would nod proudly, telling everyone that Amelia had her busyness instincts. I told myself it didn't matter. The work was what mattered. I loved the work. I loved the complex, ugly problems. I loved the feeling of building a perfect, airtight case. I just assumed that eventually the work would speak for itself. I never would have even gotten my foot in the door if it wasn't for Judith. Judith Miles was a ghost. She was a name whispered in the older financial circles. She had been Catherine's first mentor decades ago. Now, she was supposedly retired, living in a quiet apartment uptown, managing a small private fund. She was a friend of mine. Well, I was never sure what she was, but she had been a fixed point in my life. When I was 10, she taught me how to play chess. She taught me to think 10 moves ahead. She taught me that the most powerful piece on the board is often the one that moves the quietest. When I graduated college, my mother had been hesitant to hire me. She said it looked like nepotism. Judith called her. One single phone call. The next day, I had an interview. Not with my mother. With the head of analytics. We met for coffee once a month, every month for 7 years. In a small cafe far from the financial district. I would bring her my work. My models. My strategies. She would tear them apart. Gently, but surgically. She would find the one flawed assumption, the one lazy calculation. She made my work better. She made me better. She never spoke about my mother or Amelia. She just focused on the work. She taught me to keep a second set of records. A private ledger. Not of money, but of work. Every model I built. Every strategy I drafted. Every client I saved. All time-stamped. All backed up on a drive she kept for me. She always said that in this business, the person with the most complete archive wins. I never knew why. I just did it. It felt like part of our chess game. Then came the Kestrel deal. It was a $500 million energy acquisition. It was a mess. The company was drowning in complex debt and regulatory hurdles. Every other major consulting firm had passed on it. They said it was impossible. My mother passed on it, too. Amelia said it was toxic to the brand. I disagreed. I spent a week on my own time, digging into the data. I found it. The one hidden asset. A portfolio of dormant patents that were suddenly hugely valuable. I built the model. I proved it. I showed that the toxic company wasn't a liability. It was a gold mine. I took the file to my mother. She stared at my work for an hour. She didn't say I was right. She just said, "Get it done." For the next 6 months, I lived inside the Kestrel deal. I barely slept. I ate at my desk. I coordinated with lawyers, bankers, and regulators. Amelia was assigned as the client liaison, which meant she flew first class to the client's headquarters once a month to check in, while I was in a windowless data room. It was my masterpiece. I had saved the company. I had structured the acquisition. I had found $500 million that everyone else had missed. The deal was set to close on a Friday. It would be the single largest fee in Archer Consulting's history. It was my graduation. My proof. The thing that would finally make them see me. On Thursday, my mother announced a pre-celebration toast in the main boardroom. I was running late. I went to the small conference room next to my mother's office to grab my copy of the final Kestrel summary. The door was ajar. I heard my mother's voice. That smooth, confident, boardroom tone. She was on the phone. With the firm's lawyers. She was talking about a partnership restructuring. She said that with the Kestrel deal successfully closed, the firm was moving in a new direction. She said my 20% equity stake, which I had earned 3 years prior, was being dissolved and reabsorbed by the majority partners. Her and Amelia. She said I was not a long-term fit for the new brand vision. I stood there, frozen. My blood turned to ice. Then I heard Amelia. She was in the room with her. She laughed. That light, breezy laugh she used at parties. She said it was about time. She said she was tired of me being a grind and making everyone else look lazy. She said she couldn't wait to use the Kestrel bonus to buy the new condo she wanted. She said I could land somewhere else. She always did. They were stealing it. All of it. My work. My shares. My future. They were using my greatest success as the weapon to execute me. I backed away. I didn't make a sound. I walked out of the office. I didn't go to the celebration toast. I didn't answer my phone. It was raining. I drove straight to Judith's apartment. She opened the door before I could knock. She took one look at my face. She didn't say a word. She just poured me a large brandy. I walked into her quiet, lamplit study. The chessboard was set up on the table. I told her everything. The Kestrel deal. The new strategic role. The overheard conversation. The plan to steal my equity. I expected her to be angry. I expected her to give me advice. Instead, she just looked satisfied. She sat down in her leather chair. She steepled her fingers. She said she had been waiting for this day for 20 years. I was confused. I told her they were going to fire me. They were going to steal my work. She smiled. A cold, thin smile I had never seen before. She told me my mother was a brilliant strategist, but a terrible partner. She stood up and walked to a large framed painting of a winter landscape. She moved it aside. Behind it was a wall safe. She entered the code and pulled out a single, thick, leather-bound folder. It had Archer embossed on the cover in faded gold. She told me a story. 25 years ago, she founded Archer Consulting. It was her money, her clients, her name. She brought on her brilliant protege Catherine as the first CEO. She gave her autonomy. She gave her a majority of the profits. But she never ever gave her control. Judith had retained a 51% majority, non-voting, silent stake in the company. It was a golden share. It gave her the right at any time, for any reason, to call an emergency vote, dissolve the board, and assume total control. My mother had spent 25 years building a powerful empire. She just never realized she was building it in a house that she was only renting. Judith said she had watched Catherine become arrogant. She had watched her mistreat good people. She had watched her try to erase me. She said my work on the Kestrel deal, documented in the archive I had built, was the final proof. It proved I was ready. She said my mother had finally fatally overplayed her hand. She handed me a thin document from the folder. A notarized proxy. It gave me her 51% voting right. She told me to go to the meeting tomorrow. She told me to let them play their entire hand. She said that when my mother put the new partnership agreement on the table, I was to put this one on the table instead. Her eyes were clear and cold. She told me this was checkmate. The next morning, I walked into the main boardroom. The air was electric. The Kestrel clients were on one side of the massive table, all smiles. My mother, Catherine, was at the head. Amelia was beside her, practically glowing. She was wearing a new, offensively expensive suit. I took my usual seat. At the far end. The junior seat. My mother started the meeting. She gave a beautiful speech. She thanked the clients. She thanked the team. Then she turned to the internal housekeeping portion of the agenda. She slid a sleek, bound folder across the table to me. The new partnership agreement. The one that would erase me. She smiled that soft, poisonous smile. She told me it was just a formality. This was the moment. I didn't touch her folder. I reached into my own briefcase. I pulled out the leather folder Judith had given me. I slid it down the table. It stopped right in front of her. Catherine's smile froze. She looked at the old Archer logo. She looked confused. She opened it. I watched the color drain from her face. I had never seen her look like this. It wasn't anger. It was not fear. It was evaporation. The look of a person realizing the entire foundation of her life was a lie. She looked up at me. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Amelia didn't understand. She leaned over. She read the first page. The 51% share. The proxy vote. Her face went from smug to ugly in a single second. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a pure primal hatred. She finally understood. My mother's composure snapped. She hissed my name. She said this was a joke. She said Judith was gone. The boardroom doors opened. Judith walked in. She was flanked by two men from her law firm. She did not look at my mother. She did not look at me. She walked straight to the Kestrel clients. She introduced herself. Judith Miles, founder and majority shareholder of Archer Consulting. She apologized for the interruption. She said there was a small internal leadership change in progress. Catherine stood up so fast her chair screeched on the floor. She started yelling. She called me a snake, a backstabber, a traitor. Amelia started to cry. Loud, ugly, gasping sobs. She said I had stolen her life. Judith just raised her hand. Quietly. She informed the board that she was calling an emergency vote. She was removing Catherine and Amelia from their positions, and from the board, effective immediately. She informed them that she was naming me, Alex, as the new managing partner and CEO. My mother looked like she had been struck by lightning. Judith nodded to the security guards who were already standing by the door. She told them to please escort the former employees from the premises. They were marched out. Catherine was silent, white-faced, shaking. Amelia was hysterical, screaming, grabbing at her mother's arm. They were walked past the glass-walled offices, past the analysts I had trained, out of the building they thought was theirs, for the last time. The boardroom was silent. The clients looked like they had just watched a building implode. I stood up. I walked to the head of the table. I picked up the Kestrel contract. I smoothed my suit. I looked at the clients. I apologized for the interruption. I told them my predecessor had left some things in disarray. I smiled. I said, now, if you'll turn to page 40, I'd like to discuss the final implementation timeline. Judith sat in the corner, sipping a glass of water, and watched me work. We signed the deal. That night, I didn't go out to celebrate. I just walked through the executive suite. My mother's old office. Amelia's. It was all so quiet. Their things were already gone, packed into small, sad boxes by building staff. I stood at the huge glass window, the one my mother always stood at, looking down at the city lights. My mother's voice from the day before echoed in my head. She said I would land somewhere. She just never imagined it would be in her chair. I sat down. I turned on the computer. I had a lot of work to do. My work. My firm.